Okay, at this point you should have cannons 1, 2, and 3 complete. Now, if you did not jump into some sort of paint program and create your own graphics, you were working with the temporary graphics that we supplied. Those graphics took Logan a whopping 2 minutes to create. Yeah, they weren't nothing spectacular, and that is why we've got these videos here. What we're going to do is show you how we can make something that looks just a little bit more interesting, kind of make it all feel a little bit more like a fancier game.
Okay.
Hey, Zach?
Yeah, just something a little better than what we had.
Exactly. So we've brought Zach Parrish in, our resident graphics designer, and we are going to be switching over from a gray background to a black background. It'll just make it kind of feel more like we're flying through space.
Sure, sure.
So with that, Zach, let's go ahead and start out with the projectile.
Okay, now the projectile is an 8x8 image?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go to File, New. And now I'm already set to a height and width of 8x8. Make sure you are set to pixels just in case you don't want to make 8 inches by 8 inches. And we'll click OK. I'm going to tap the F key to go full screen. Now, what we'll be doing eventually, and just keep this in mind, we can tap F again, and we can see what our image is going to look like on a black background, which will be very useful, but we lose a lot of our interface when we do that, so watch out for that. So let's tap F 2 more times just to take us back to standard full screen. And I'll use my navigator here. If you don't see your navigator for some reason, just pop over to Window and make sure it's visible. And let's just zoom way in, and it never gets that big because it's actually a very, very small image. Now, we're doing this on a black background. Now, I already have my default color set up to white as the foreground, black as the background. If yours aren't for some reason, hit the D key and then hit X. D sets you to default colors. X is going to swap those two back around. And then we can hold down Control and hit Delete, and that'll fill us in with a black background and still leave us with a white foreground to paint with, which is pretty cool. Now, I'm going to add in a new layer by clicking the New Layer button down here in the lower right-hand corner. There we go. And we could name this layer if we wanted to. Just double-click on it. We'll call this Projectile. There we go. Sounds good. Now, I want to paint a little white dot in here, but I want to make sure it's dead on in the center of the image. So let's go to View, and we'll drop in a new guide. And this will be vertically 50% along our document. And then back to View, and we'll do a new guide again, and horizontally 50% along the document. So we get a little crosshair that we can use. Now I'm going to switch over to the pencil tool instead of paintbrush, so just hold down the left mouse button over your paintbrush and you'll see the pencil tool hidden inside of it. And this is really simple. We're just going to click once on each corner of our little crosshair, and there we go. So now we have a little projectile. We're done. That was a great image. Now actually we're going to use layer effects to make this look a little cooler than it does. Let's hit Control H to make our guides go away. That's for hiding, and you can of course hit Control H to bring them back again if ever you should need them. But come down here to your projectile layer and double click over on the right hand side. And you're going to get your layer style window. Now here in the background we can pull this guy off to the side so we can kind of see everything that's going on here. What I'm going to do is add an outer glow, and we can't really see much of an effect there because it's really pale and it's this funny looking yellow. The first thing I'm going to do is set my blend mode over to normal, and we can push up our opacity a little bit, and let's change our color because that yellow is just kind of gross. We'll do kind of a bright cyan, and now let's start changing our spread and our size. So spread, of course, has a huge effect. We also boost up the size a little bit. The thing is, though, if you push your size up too far, you're actually blending it over a really large area that's bigger than your image. So if you suddenly lose everything, you just took the size a little bit far. So let's bring up our spread just a tad, and really got to be gentle with the size. Push up one more time. It's probably actually too far. The thing is, you got to kind of push these both at the same time, one and then the other. Get a little bit of back and forth going on there. That's looking pretty good. We could also maybe bring the color down just a tad. Maybe something a little bit greener. That's actually more like what I had in mind. Okay. So let's click OK. And if we want to see this on a true black background at its original size, make sure you take your navigator and pull it back all the way to 100% so it gets really, really tiny. And hit F again, and there you go.
That'll work.
So now you've got your little tiny projectile and you're set to go. So that takes care of that. That was really easy. We need to go ahead and save this. So let's go ahead and File, Save As. Now, what's our output type?
PNG file.
All right, we're doing this to PNGs in the end. Now, I'm a big fan of maybe making a separate folder called Originals. And this is where I put my PSDs so that if I ever need to go back and make any tweaks, I've always got that. And we'll call this Canon _ projectile in nice big all caps, and we'll maximize our compatibility. And as soon as that's done, I'll hit Control-Shift-S, which is Save As for you really fancy hotkey users out there, and we'll just take this and set it down to PNG. And
we've got some other ones. We'll just write over them.
That's right. We'll just write over it. Plump.
Okay. Getting rid of our old ones.
All right. So there is our projectile. I guess the next thing we could go ahead and take out is the ship.
Okay.
Because that was a little too easy. We'll go ahead and close this and get it out of the way. Let's go to File, New Document. Now, this is going to be 32 by 32?
That's correct.
Okay, making sure. So 32, tab twice, and then 32 again. And here we go. Go ahead and press F so that things are nice and big in the screen. And we'll use our navigator, of course, to fly back in. Now, of course, we have a lot more room to work with here. Still not so much that we can actually make it larger than the screen. It's still a pretty small image overall. We're still working on a black background. So since our background color is set to black, hold down Control and hit Delete to go ahead and fill that in. Also, it'd be nice to have some guides in place. Now, this ship that we're building basically needs to face upward, so a horizontal guide isn't really necessary. You can throw one in if you want to. I'm not going to. We're just going to add a vertical guide. So let's go to View, New Guide, Vertical, and again at 50%. And there we go. Okay, now I'm a big fan, if I'm going to make something that's even remotely complex, of busting my image up into as many layers as I can for tweaking purposes later on. So we're going to start off with the body of our ship, like the main fuselage, if you will. Let's go ahead and drop in a new layer, and we'll name this fuselage. Now, we want this to be even on both sides. We want it to be symmetrical, and that can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Let's switch back over to the paintbrush tool. So hold down the left mouse button, and you'll find the brush tool. And I'll make my brush just a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do is paint out, well, actually, I'm so not used to using this particular mouse, but we'll make it happen anyways. What I want to do is paint out kind of an egg-like shape. And I'm just going really carefully. I'm not going all the way down my document, just something kind of like this. And then we'll just take a few strokes, and notice I'm only painting it really on one half. It's because here in just a moment we're going to push it over to the other side. What is it? My flow rate's at 100. Okay, and it's just painting slower than I think it should. And I'll maybe push the nose up a little bit further. Don't worry too much about what goes on over here. Again, we've got to kind of symmetricalize it.
Okay. Nice word.
Yes. So now that we've got like one half of it generally in place, we can just grab our marquee select tool. You can also just tap the M key if you need to get that tool out, and we'll drag a box around the right half of this object here. Now let's switch over to the Move tool, which you can also access by tapping the V key. And I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift, and we're going to drag this guy over here, like so. Now once we've done that, we're going to go to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, and then I'll just use my arrow keys and we'll nudge it right back over and hit Control-D to deselect. So now it's all nice and symmetrical, and everybody's happy. Now, let's see. From here, we could go ahead and start adding some of the design, because, of course, flat white just doesn't look very good. So I'm going to, again, just for simplicity's sake and for speed purposes, we're going to do this in some layer styles, which gives a very distinct look. It may not be the look you're going for. I mean, in a lot of cases, you might want to hand paint this kind of thing or whatever, but let's just double-click over on the right-hand side of our layer again. Now, this time, we don't have a lot of room, so we're going to have to kind of play with screen space a little bit. But let's start with a color overlay. So just choose what color you want your ship to be. Now, I'm going to do something along the lines of a medium to dark gray, and kind of reserving the right to change that later on if I want to. The cool thing about using layer styles like this, or if later on if I decide I want a red ship, just come back in here to the color overlay and choose a shade of red. No problem. So let's cancel that out. Next, I'm going to pop over to Bevel and Emboss, which is going to be our little cheat for getting a three-dimensional look on this almost instantaneously. Make sure the first thing you do, though, is switch off Use Global Light, because you're going to be tweaking this around. Let's go ahead and put this right about dead center at 90 degrees, because this thing's kind of lining upwards, or it's, aiming upwards. So we get the light kind of coming in from above, and we'll pull that down just a little bit. So there's a pretty good start. Now let's tweak some things around. We can take our highlight and push its opacity up so it's a little bit brighter. We can maybe take our shadows and darken them up a little as well. I also wouldn't mind pushing up the size of this just a tad more so it doesn't look like the ship flattens off on top. Again, in this case, you only have like 32 pixels to play with, so you don't have a lot of room. Just use whatever you can. We can increase the depth, so that's really going to make your shadows kind of start to stand out. So you'll want to play with that a little bit to get, well, your favorite look out of it. And don't necessarily want to soften it up too much. I think that's actually going to work for now. So there's a really simple fuselage. I'm going back and forth. I might want to pull back. Ooh, I don't want to do whatever I just did there. That was no good. And bring that light back down just a tad. Work with me. Hi. You just didn't want to pull straight down for some reason. Okay, that's closer. I might want to just take a little bit of the edge off the shininess factor. Okay, so there is a really simple fuselage. And again, if you're a little concerned or you don't know how it looks or whatever, make sure that you hit Control-H to hide your guide, and then set your navigator back to 100%. And so remember how tiny this thing is. It's very, very small. So now what we have is a steel eggplant. And the next thing I'm going to add is the wings. So let's go ahead and drop on a new layer, and we'll double-click this, and we'll call it Wings. Now, here's the trick. I'm going to start off just by, well, I guess we could paint them, but let me start off with the polygon tool, just to do something a little different. We'll just drag out the shape of a wing, so maybe hold down Shift here to get a nice straight edge, and something kind of like so, and double-click. And there we go. It looks a little bit funny, but don't let that stress you out just yet. Make sure you are on your new layer. You have white selected, so hold down Alt this time, which is for the foreground color, and hit Delete, and it'll fill in. Now, the problem we have here is that our wing is now it's above our fuselage, and that doesn't help us very much. It looks a little funny. So also, I did hit Control-D there while I was talking to deselect, if you're wondering where my selection went. So let's take our wings and let's drag them underneath the fuselage in the stack, and now they kind of slip underneath. They still look very, very plain, or the singular wing. There's no they to them right now, is there? But we're getting to that. Let's go ahead and just keep working with one wing for now. Again, we're going to add a layer style. Now, I'm not sure what color you guys may be going for. Please feel free to have fun with this, tweak things around a little bit, go for some more color. I'm more of the utilitarian thing when it comes to spaceships. They should be gray or maybe have a couple of stripes here and there for a squadron, but that's about it. So let's grab maybe a gradient overlay. And the gray to black's a little bit extreme, so let's play with our gradient a tad. We'll grab our color here. Now, I just flew through that, didn't I? I don't want to scare anybody, so let me cancel that out. If you click on your gradient, and I'm just so used to doing this, I go into autopilot. Now we have our flag here for the color. Go ahead and click on that, and then you have your color box. You click on that. 57 windows are now open, and just pull your color picker up a little bit, maybe to a lighter gray, something about like so. And I think that's going to look all right. And maybe push the gray of it up just a tad, so the front of the wing is a little lighter than the back of the wing. Okay, so that's looking pretty good for starters. Again, if you want to add little things, we are adding some details to this later on a separate layer. So don't get too stressed out yet. If you're completely unfamiliar with Photoshop, just follow along and you'll see where we're going. And then if you want to experiment when I'm done, more power to you. Okay, so next from here, let me go back and grab my pencil tool again. And what I'm going to do is add some more volume to the wing. Just take it right out to the edge of the image so that, maybe if we run into something, how can I put this? Because this is kind of almost back to programming terms. Your sprites are going to collide with each other at their edges. So whenever possible, you want your image, whatever image you're painting on your sprite, to get as close to the edge as you can. That way the collision looks like it's actually kind of happening. So we'll push that right out to the edge. I'm not going to worry too much about the nose, though you could if you wanted to. Let's grab our paintbrush now, and I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. So I'm going to hold down the left mouse button, then hold down Shift and paint a stroke straight back, and we'll just kind of scribble up and down a little bit to add a little bit of thickness. All we're doing is making the wing look a little more interesting than it did 4 seconds ago. And I guess that's all there is to it. So let's back out a little bit, have a quick look at that. So there we go. Now, if you want to get a little fancier with that, you could maybe come in here back to your pencil tool, because that's not going to have any anti-aliasing. And you could maybe put like a cool angle on this. Let's maybe switch over to the eraser. Now my eraser has a mode set to pencil. Now what that means is it's going to erase the same way the pencil tool actually adds ink, which is one full un-anti-alias block at a time. So if you want to add like kind of a cool sharp angle to that, you can do that. And of course, just take a second and pull back and see what it looks like. I'll maybe add one more pixel in there. Tink. And I'll pull that out. Yeah, it's not bad. Okay, so coming along, now we just need our second wing in place. So let's grab our marquee select tool, hit Control H to bring back our guide, and let's just drag a marquee box around this entire half of the image. I'm going to hit V now to get my move tool. By the way, you just saw me move the canvas around. That's holding the spacebar key. You can actually hear it on the recording, I'm sure. But let's go ahead and hit the V key to grab our move tool. I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift, and we'll drag that over here to the opposite side. Again, just like before, Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, and all you have to do is use the left arrow key to push it right up against the edge of the image, and everybody's all nice and lined up. So now we have two wings, and everybody's looking cool. Maybe take a moment and back out. Have a quick look. Cool. All right, the next thing I want to add is our canopy, which is, there's a lot of different ways you could do this. You could do like the little bubble kind of canopy. You could do the kind that wraps around like a 747. However you want to do this. I'm going to do the kind of wrap around sort of crescent shape. And really that's all we're adding is more or less a crescent shape that we're going to tweak a little bit. So at the very top of our layer stack, let's add a new layer. And we will call this canopy, canapes. And let's grab our brush tool. And again, just like before, paint off on one side. It'll just make your life a little easier. And we'll get something about like so. If you're having a hard time seeing because of the reflection, you could grab your fuselage and come up here to the opacity slider and pull that back a little bit. So you can just kind of make out where your ship is, but now you see mostly just the canopy that you're painting. I'm going to switch back over to the eraser, and I'm going to start... Make sure I'm not deleting the fuselage. That's no good. If you need to undo more than once, because like if you just hit Control-Z like in every other application, you only get one undo. You do have more than one undo in Photoshop. You can hold down Control, Alt, and Z, and you can kind of step back through your history and undo multiple times. Let's go back to the canopy, though, and I'm going to take out some of these excess pixels that I don't really need. We'll keep the canopy fairly small. Also notice I'm really only painting one side of it, again, just like before. Maybe something like that. Yeah, we'll give that a try, and then if I need to add to it, it'll be really easy to do. So again, I like the whole idea of layer styles because they they set you up for very simple editability. So let's double-click over here on the right-hand side of our layer again, and we'll slide this guy over here so that we can kind of see him. And let's do a color overlay. Do you have a color?
I'm leaving it up to you.
Oh, man. You have no input at all. That's all right. We'll try with orange just for a minute. And it looks really brash for a moment. We'll probably have to darken that up. But let's go ahead and start with a bevel and emboss. And what I'm going to do is switch this over to a pillow emboss. And if you've never seen a pillow emboss, it's kind of like when you're doing stampings into leather, where it's like the inner shape is going to have a bevel to it, but then the shape on the outside of that's going to be beveled too. It looks terrible when you first put it in, but now we just need to tweak some things. So bring your size way down to like 1 pixel or less, and all it's doing is adding a little bit of a ridge around there. We might pull back on the depth a little bit too. And now we can also take the opacity of our highlights and our shadows and bleed that back a little bit. So it's just kind of, as you can see, just making mild adjustments. For a moment, though, let's click OK and get out of there. Let's take our fuselage and put that back all the way up at 100% so we can get a clearer idea of what this is going to look like, because right now we're kind of shooting in the dark. Also, let's jump back to the canopy, and we'll grab what's over here on the right-hand side again, just like we did before. Hit the V key to get the move tool. Hold down Alt and Shift and drag to the left, and let's edit. We could probably, can we do a transform again? No, nothing so quaint. Let's just flip horizontal, and then we'll just right arrow key to put that right back in. Control D to deselect, and there we go. Now, this is a good time to go ahead and start editing a little bit. So I'm going to grab my pencil tool and maybe add those 2 pixels back in just because I think it looks a little better. The 2 that were missing there just looked a little bit off to me. If you need to maybe edit some things out, add pixels. The cool thing is now you can more or less paint canopy on wherever you want it. So if you want a couple of windows back here, it's like, oh, add a window and then add another window if you feel the urge to do that. It's just kind of fun. I'm going to erase those back out for now. Alright, so let's go back in here to the canopy settings, and that's the help center trying to come up. Just ignore that. And let's see. Let's bring down our shadows. Not too much. I kind of like what it was doing there. I guess that's about it. Maybe we'll change the color a little bit. We could darken it up just a notch, because the super bright mega orange canopy was just a little much for me. So there we go. So now we have a canopy in place. Now the next thing I'd like to add would be some details, because our jet, or ship, whatever this is looking a little bit on the plain side. Now we don't have a lot of pixels for details. That's the truth of the matter. But what I'm going to do is add a new layer, which we will call details. And we're going to grab a special tool. It's located here underneath your shape tools. So you see right here where my mouse is. Currently I have the ellipse tool available. If I hold down the left mouse button, I have a big long stack of things I can use. So here's the line tool. We'll go ahead and select that. But up here at the top in your options, and depending on what you have hidden in Photoshop, you may not see these options. So if that scares you, come over here to Window and make sure that options is visible. And what you're going to do is uncheck anti-alias. The reason is anti-alias is going to add gray or faded pixels around your line, and you have so precious few pixels to play with that that's going to make things look a little funny. So let's go ahead and switch our two colors out. Just click on your, you have a little switch button here. Switch foreground and background colors, or just tap the X key so that now X is our foreground color. Switch off anti-alias, and we can just paint a line here, and there you go. And now I'm going to hold down Shift, and we'll paint another line here. And really, that's all there is to it. Now, that looks a little bit too severe because it is pitch black. Don't worry about it for now. We're just kind of doing this to figure out where the highlights are going to go, and then we'll tweak from there. Now, over here on the wing, let's put a little bit of highlight or some detail as well. So I'll drag one stripe maybe up here. I'll drag something back like so, and then another one straight back. And there we go. Now let's get this mirrored over to the opposite side. It's, again, the exact same thing we were doing before. Make sure you're on the details layer. You drag your marquee selection box across whatever side you happen to paint on. Hit V to grab your move tool. Hold down Alt and Shift. Drag over to the right this time. Edit, transform, flip horizontal. Now, I have had people ask me, they're like, well, Zach, why don't you go ahead and just paint the whole thing and then flip it all over at once? You could. I just like kind of seeing it while I work. It's just a matter of preference. So now that we have these details more or less in place, you can mess around with them a little bit just by starting off maybe with the opacity and kind of make them so they're not so dark on the surface. You can also adjust their blend mode. Maybe set them over to overlay a little bit so that they start to pick up some of that specular highlight that's involved on the ship, because that can look pretty cool too. So let's hide out that great big blue guide, which is right there in our way. That's with Control-H once again, and we'll jump all the way back to 100%, and there's what our ship is looking like. In general, I'm happy with it, but it's missing one key element for a ship. What is that?
Probably some sort of fire from the back.
Yeah, we have to have thrusters of some sort, and we're going to cheat. We're going to do the exact same thing we did with the projectiles, because it's such an easy thing to do. So we'll create a new layer, and we'll call this thrusters. And let's grab our pencil tool, except I'll make it just a little bit bigger. Maybe I might undo that. But anyways, take your outer glow, and notice I haven't painted anything yet because this will be more fun. And pick a slightly greenish shade of cyan, so aquamarine or whatever you want to call it. And I'll push the spread up to about 6 pixels, and we'll push the size up a little as well. I'm sure I'll have to tweak these. Okay, so now that I've got that, let's... I'm going to make it back down to 1 pixel. Hold down the Shift key and just paint from left to right. And that doesn't look right. Why? Because my paint color is black. So that's no good. Hit Control-Z. And we can set this over to white. Or a really cool trick I like to use, so this is one you can put in your back pocket. Use like something obnoxious, like bright red. And that's just to tell you where the thruster is going to be for later on if you're editing your shape or whatever. Now you know exactly where that's going to be placed, because now you can go into your layer styles and set your color overlay to bright white. So now it's just like you did paint white in the first place. So now let's go back to our outer glow, and we'll edit that around a little bit. Let's take our spread and push it up. That's a little too far. That's not bad. And we can also get our move tool with the V key and maybe slide that down 1 pixel. And let's back out and take a quick look. So there it is at 100, and it's got a little bar across the back, kind of like the Millennium Falcon. And I think that's going to work.
Yeah, it's cool.
So we've got our ship, and that's all taken care of. We've got our projectile done, and I think that's going to wrap up everything in this video.
Yeah, the next one we'll do the target.
All right, cool.